I went to Jackson, Wyoming to visit my sister who actually lives in Victor, Idaho. I did some skiing. Here you see the plane, or the view outside the plane, as we are heading towards Salt Lake City. I have to apologize, this video probably won't be one of my more interesting videos. Here we are descending into the clouds as we head into Salt Lake City. And just a minute, we're going to break through the clouds. It was a Delta flight. I'll talk a little bit more about Delta later. I had some fairly negative experiences with Delta, and I was feeling like I might be like Charlie on the MTA, that I might never make it back. Well, we're getting a little lower in altitude as we head into Salt Lake City, Utah, and I generally love to sit by the window. I love to look out the window throughout the entire flight. I sure wish they had a map that would tell us exactly where we are going over. Wouldn't that be great? As you looked out, you knew exactly where you were flying over. The entire trip from Boston to Salt Lake City, from Salt Lake City to Jackson, Wyoming, from Jackson, Wyoming to Denver, from Denver to Cincinnati, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and from Cincinnati to Boston, everything had a snow cover. The entire thing had a snow cover. Now we're coming to our landing at Salt Lake City, and as we get a little bit lower, it'll be defined a little bit better. What you see was not recorded on a typical video camera. It was recorded on my Evo, which turned out to be an invaluable resource, particularly on the way back. Since they now charge $25 for baggage, I carried a fairly large carry-on and a little smaller briefcase type packet, which made getting in and out fairly easy, but inhibited me from carrying too much back when I headed back. And of course, you had to carry everything around with you in the airport, which was generally a royal pain. I like landings. Always like to see if we're going to bounce and hit the runway, and here we are. We are over the airport now, just about, and we'll see if we bounce and hit. And then I always like it when they reverse the engines, and I like to hear that noise. Now we are taking off from Salt Lake City, heading towards Jackson, Wyoming, sometimes called Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And as you can see, the view isn't quite as good. I am on the wing. I took some motion sickness pills because the last time I flew into Jackson, Wyoming, I almost had to use the bag that they provide. However, this flight was a little bit more gentle, particularly since we were coming from Salt Lake City, and you don't quite go over the same number of mountains. We are starting to come into Jackson Hole Airport in Wyoming. When we got to the ground, the temperature was a balmy 7 degrees. But it was a nice approach. As you can see, if I could only chop that wing off, we certainly would have had a better look at the scenery. That wing certainly did get in the way. However, I had a feeling if I did take the wing off, we might have another problem that might be a little bit more difficult to handle. So kind of left the wing on. They don't feed you very much. Actually, they don't feed you at all anymore, except for a couple of bags of peanuts. Strangely, no one seems to have peanut allergies on plane flights anymore. I guess it's something that disappears when you leave schools, where they have peanut-free classrooms, and you head onto airplanes, where basically they either give you a choice of peanuts, pretzels, or cookies. The juice was rather good, though. They do give you a choice of that. In the distance, I believe you see the Grand Teton Mountains as we start to get further into our descent. I should mention I didn't take as many pictures as I should have, particularly of my sister's beautiful home and the areas that I went skiing and visited in Jackson. And on my way back, it was really nerve-wracking. So I really should have had many more pictures, but I didn't. And I hope you forgive me, but that's the way it was.
Good luck, Bert. I wish Samantha were here to show patience. And Samantha, if you're watching this, you should have seen the ordeal this morning trying to get his boots on. It was worse than getting him to go down the hill. It must have taken a half an hour for him to just get those boots on. He's doing so much better, though. He's actually making it down the hill in less than a minute. Before it was like 15 minutes to get down the hill. It was almost like he was stopped. Okay, I don't know if you can see him, but he is at the bottom now.
I did go up the regular ski lift. It was a beginner ski lift, but it went up quite a ways. And I did go around about 15 times. The first time I went up the ski lift, when I got off, it looked like a rather steep fall to go down, but as I turned out, it really was pretty decent. And I went around about 15 times, fell once, and that was near the end. I did make a mistake and crossed out from the beginning area into the intermediate area and got going so fast I thought I was going to get killed. Then I tried it again. Didn't go quite as fast, but almost got killed the second time. Next, we will go to the Jackson Hole Elk Refuge, where the elks winter. This was the coldest part of my trip to Wyoming. Actually, the temperature was 33 degrees, but the winds were ferocious, as you will hear as you hear some of the descriptions being said.
So if you flip this over, it's that long, and it goes from the fence here to the foothills on the far side. Now, that fence throws a lot of people off. They think that we take the elk in here, we keep them in captivity, use this as a tourist attraction, and we let the elk out, is what people like to say. And that fence there is actually to keep the people out, not the elk in. There's no fence whatsoever. The entire northern section to the east all the way back to the south, that whole section there, there's no fence at all. And the reason why that fence we have is people would stop and try to walk out here to see the elk, which would make the elk run away. So we have to keep the people out and let the elk in. This is the winter range for the elk. If you were to come out here in the summertime, you wouldn't see any elk at all. They come down in late October, early November, and they'll stay here until the following spring. By the middle of April, these elk will all completely be going out of here, and we won't have any elk till the next fall.
Next, I tried cross-country skiing. That was also a little nerve-wracking, although not quite so bad. They first had a track that I tried to go around. That was kind of boring. But then I went into this nice country-type field, and it was beautiful and very, very quiet. You won't hear any background noise. I didn't take the audio out of the recording. It is as quiet and possibly serene as can be. However, I did make a mistake trying to go down a hill, and I fell down face first right into the snow. My sister managed to preserve a blanket that covered me when I was just an infant, and 65 years later, the same blanket, almost in perfect condition, was covering me once again, although I was a little bit larger this time. Here I am flying from Jackson Hole to Denver. I was supposed to go to Salt Lake City, but the plane that I was supposed to go out in never actually made it to Jackson, Wyoming. Got into a bit of a tiff with the agent, particularly my sister had a dispute with an agent nearby because she checked online in the morning and it said that the plane was not delayed. Well, in fact, the plane wasn't even there. But the agent there said that the posting of delay had happened the night before. The agent that I was dealing with got into quite a huff.
So at this time, all four electronic devices must be off. All tray tables and seatbelts must be in the upright long position. North Carolina should be well set at this time. I will be back to the cabin one more time to pick up any others who wish to start.
And he decided I wasn't flying anywhere today unless my sister vacated the area. He worked hard to find me another route, but he certainly was overly sensitive and not a very good representative of Delta Airlines. Well, here we are coming into Denver, and I was going to find out I was going to get quite a surprise when we landed, because I had been rerouted from Jackson to Denver to Cincinnati to Boston, but there was a blizzard in Boston coming that night, and they canceled the flight from Cincinnati to Boston. So when I landed in Denver, my options were to fly to Detroit or to fly to Cincinnati. And I figured I'd fly to Cincinnati because worst come to worst, I could probably drive. But worst did come to worst, and they canceled the flight in Cincinnati to Boston as soon as I got there. So I felt like Charlie on the MTA. I didn't know whether I was going, where I was going, and when I was going. After a 7-hour layover in Denver, I decided to take the flight to Cincinnati, even though I knew the Cincinnati to Boston leg had been canceled, and I'd figured out what I'd do when I get there. When I did get there, I figured I'd be sleeping in the airport, but Delta does have a relations area there, and I went there figuring they could possibly provide me no possible help whatsoever. But they managed to give me a voucher to stay at a Comfort Inn for $39, and since I had bought travel insurance, so I stayed there, not realizing I was never in Cincinnati to begin with, but was in Kentucky, making that a new state for me, my 44th state. The flight was supposed to go out the next day, 24 hours later at 7 p.m. Never thought that flight would get off. Waited in the airport for 7 hours the next day, and at 7 o'clock that evening, I couldn't believe it. The flight did get off because almost no flights were going into Boston because of the blizzard. But we were one of the first flights to land in Boston at Logan. And when I called the hotel where my car was parked, they came and got me. It took them a while to get me. And, of course, I had to dig my car out from the blizzard. And then when I got home on Cape Cod, had to plow my way into the driveway. But I was home at last, ready to kiss the ground.